Wow. Well, for those of you who haven't seen, there is a new video out on Netflix called The Tinder Swindler, and it has all of the ingredients of something quite interesting. It's a kind of a documentary show. It includes, fast cars, illegal travel, ripping people off, lots of money, scams with credit, on and on and on. And just a crazy, crazy story. So I definitely recommend you check it out. It's pretty interesting. But I'm going to use it as some context today. I'm just going to talk about it, kind of my experience of it, and particularly viewing it from the perspective of how the hell does somebody get away with this kind of stuff? What is kind of going on behind the scenes in the system? And hopefully it'll be, rather interesting for you. So if you haven't seen it, go and check it out. I'll try not to ruin too much for you, but, warning, I will have some comments that will probably tell a little bit of the story. So let's dive in. For those of you who haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, hit the all notification bell. Here we help people with international, relocating abroad, getting residencies and citizenships, optimizing tax. If you'd like help with those things, please contact us. You can book a call, comedy.com/Michael-Rosmer, link in the description below, or send a message to our websites, offshorecitizen.net and offshorecapitalist.com. Okay, so what is this story all about? So it opens up essentially with the story of this girl from Norway who ended up going on Tinder and finding this guy who is apparently the Prince of Diamonds, the heir to a diamond fortune, son of this billionaire by the name of Simon Leviev. And she, is like, wow, this is fantastic, right? She gets caught up in the life of this guy on their first date. They fly on a private jet to Bulgaria together, and she's smitten, right? Now, it turns out all is not kosher with this dude, and after, kind of this romance, this whirlwind experience where he's not really available, he's always traveling, always on business, but always, staying in the best places, has these, amazing stories on Instagram, sends these videos, but is still very attentive. She starts to get involved in some of this harrowing drama that's going on. His life is being threatened, all these things are happening, and pretty soon he's in need for her help, and she starts sending him money at his request. Now, a couple things here. First of all, I think the immediate crazy thing that people hopefully by now know, but yet all still seem to buy into, is this idea that social media is not real life. And it's actually one of the things that I hate. You have this way that people think, the way they process information, is they're looking for these signals to kind of give credibility. And because you probably don't know someone who knows that person in the big world today, instead you look for these online social signals, which are, follower count, all these flashy cars and, all these brands, etc. These are considered to be like stamps of approval. And unfortunately, people just buy into this stuff, even though it's largely nonsense. It's something that I absolutely hate. I totally dislike it, and I try hard not to put that out there, partly for this reason. I have seen people over the years leverage this and lie to people and just terrible, terrible stuff. So I use it as kind of a contra-indicator. People who are behaving that way, as far as I'm concerned, it's like you should probably watch out. But there's a group of people who haven't been exposed to those things, and as a result, they get sucked in. And so, all that glitters is not gold, right? Now, the interesting thing, when I heard about this story, I was thinking to because they've had an article on it, there was a really great examination. The people who sort of uncovered this were some journalists from Norway, did a great job, kudos to them, and they'd put out the Tinder Swindler news story some time ago, which Netflix has then adapted into this sort of documentary. And by the way, kudos to the girls who were kind of involved in ultimately trying to go after this guy, because unfortunately there's just a bunch of piece of shit human beings out there in the world today who can get away with things, and it's just really not good. So back to the story. When I first heard about this, I was thinking, like, why would somebody start sending money to this person they're dating? What I didn't get is this guy invested a lot into this person before ever asking for money. Showed a lot of wealth, had a lot of experiences, was very generous, was very vulnerable, exposed these weak sides, and really built a deep emotional connection with the person, which, if you think about it, as a fake person, this is cold. This is horrible, right? Like, deeply manipulative, it's just totally inauthentic. But, sucks her in. And so you can start to understand from her perspective why she might want to help. But then you can ask, well, hang on, like, how can he possibly make this work, right? You're paying to fly in a private jet. This is expensive. Private jets are not cheap. So how can you get this out of some girl who's, just a normal girl? Well, enter the next thing, debt. So it turns out that there are ways that people, basically the credit system works. So I rail against banks all the time. I hate banks. I think banks are the bane of existence in many different regards. They've impeded business. It's terrible. But you can start to understand when you see the fraud that's out there why banks are wary. And so what happens in this case, as it goes down, she first starts giving him money. And this is this person she loves. She's working on building a life with him. He just needs a little bit of help. There's some reasons, it makes sense. She knows him, she trusts him, give him the money. But that runs out quickly. And so now what? He says, hey, listen, you know what? Let me just add you to my Amex Platinum package. And you can get an Amex Platinum and you can give it to me because I need to have access to this money and I can't have it in my name for various reasons, right? So, okay, perfect. And he's like, hey, look, you need to raise the limit. Well, how do I raise the limit? No problems. I'm going to hire you for my company. She's like, but I don't work for your company. He's like, no, but you do, because I'm the CEO, so I'll just verify it. And pretty soon he's giving her pay stubs to prove that she's making $94,000 a month. And so $250,000 limit, no problem, right? Up the limits go, which he immediately can max out those cards. And one after another. Now, it's interesting to note that in this world of easy money, cheap money, banks want to lend. They're under pressure to lend. That's how they make this margin. And, negative interest rates. Who wants to hold cash? Lend it out. It turns out the rules are pretty good to protect them. They kind of know their numbers, right? Somebody comes along who looks really creditworthy. They've got a great stable job at a big company. Why not lend them money? They'll pay it back over time. They'll be the recipients at high interest. This is a golden goose, except that it's not, because it's all fake. This being said, it's kind of terrifying to think about how these systems that are relied on can be manipulated, and how, on the one hand, it's really bad that they can be manipulated in general, and how this has such fallout in terms of other people having to worry about, okay, you're doing nothing wrong, but they're suspicious of you. Why? Well, because there's fraudsters out there who are going and running scams. It's way, way worse when that money isn't being ripped off really by the person who's taking it, but they're a victim who is being ripped off by somebody else. And it's brutally deceptive. Now, it turns out the guy isn't just going after her. He's got a whole host of them. He's running a little Ponzi scheme of these girls. Every city he goes to, he runs the Tinder algorithm, he gets girls, and he brings them into the machine. And he does the same thing, running it up. He's sending them the same videos. They get to see, oh my gosh, this guy loves me, sends the same texts. Very attentive, must be an incredible actor, stages the same types of things for them, clearly plans this thing to an inordinate degree, and obviously must have some insight into the types of people who he can get and suck in, but honestly also really invests in, who's gonna see through this? You Google him, he comes up. You look at his Instagram, he comes up. He can show you these videos, he can show you these pictures. Everything checks out. What could go wrong, right? Well, it turns out what could go wrong is that all of it is paid for on the money of other people like this. So needless to say, where does this lead? Well, nowhere good for anyone who's involved. And I won't ruin the story to find out kind of what happened, but it's great. It's great. This being said, I think it introduces another element that people may wonder about. So you've got somebody who ultimately they discover, has served time in prison. He has a history of fraud for many years. He was originally not by the name of Simon Leviev. He's used multiple names over the years. He's changed his names, kind of gone under different guises or aliases, telling these stories, painting this picture with an entourage around him that people are very impressed and wowed by. And what is it that allows him to get away with this? And here we find some really interesting kind of quirks of the law. So the first thing is, you notice that actually, technically, it's not that clear what laws he's breaking. Because although he's scamming this person, to some extent they're doing it willingly. And if he asks them, hey, listen, can you lend me some money? They lend him some money. Can you go and get a loan so that you can give money? This is for our future. This is whatever. I mean, at the end of the day, you could say, well, he should be financially liable for this, but they signed on the dotted line, right? They called up Amex. They asked to have the limit raised. They're sitting there authorizing card transactions. They're going to a payday loan company to get some extra money. They're wiring funds from their bank account, and so on and so forth, which is, ultimately almost implicating them in a bit of what's going on. And in fact, in certain situations, probably can feed on the overall crime. Then there's these people who are in his circle. What are they guilty of? They go along with the story. Is that a crime? Where's the crime here? On top of that, he's constantly bouncing from country to country. He's in Prague one day, he's in Mykonos the next day, he's in Paris the next, he's in Amsterdam the next, he's in Munich the next, and so on. What's going on here? In any one of these places, his footprint is relatively small. And the reality is that although he's wanted by the police in Israel, the communication between the police in Israel and the police in Prague is not very good. So he has the ability to fly under the radar. They don't have that many resources. They're overwhelmed. How do they go after this guy? So it's great that you ultimately had some determined people who really put the effort into tracking him down and went to the press. And then you had some great investigative journalists who followed the trail between countries, and ultimately it got set up to be able to kind of do this big expose on the guy. Now the sad part of this is, what's probably going to come out of it, I suspect, is the opposite side, which is this guy is probably going to end up making more money legitimately because of this documentary than all of the other stuff previously, because the exposure is going to be huge. Today, attention is this ultimate resource that is so scarce and so valuable, and when you can attract it, there's all kinds of things you can do with it. The guy's clearly smart, right? Clearly smart guy. So in all likelihood, he'll have ways of working kind of this attention and turning it to his advantage. So I guess you could say, great movie, very interesting to go through these things. I think key lessons are don't trust don't trust conventional image. All the stuff, all image is bullshit for the most part, just mostly bullshit. The things that people can hack your perceptions on, don't follow that. Number two, realize how the credit system works, etc., and how it can be manipulated. And I mean, it's a tool if you use it wisely, and it's something that can be really damaging on the other side. These women were left with tons and tons of debt that may take them decades to pay off. Really terrible. Take the motherfuckers down when they're, it's just, when people are like this, it angers me a lot. I think that it's really, really bad that there are certain people who understand how to prey on people and slip between the cracks, so it's unlikely that something bad will happen to them. And at the same time, I think there's a lesson to learn, which is, you can take some key things that these people do well and bring them into something good, hopefully. And one of those is, the power of PR. Power of PR, as much as I'm, railing against how it goes on here, it's pretty significant. Which brings us to the final point, which is, there was a whole world out there. And in this case, that gave this guy who's a criminal freedom. It doesn't have to be criminals. It can be other people who can benefit from it as well. So let me know your thoughts. If you've seen it, put it in the comments below what you think. If you have any specific questions about, how some of the things could have been done when it seems so risky and so insane. I mean, I'm sure the guy was, probably really nervous all the time. I mean, you're just constantly running all these cons. It must be super stressful in a certain sense. Guy probably has some sort of psychosis or something. It's nuts. But very interesting nonetheless, just to see how the world can open up for some young guy who's willing to have no scruples. So with that in mind, I'll see you guys on the next video.